Hello, and thank you for joining me on my program today. I'm actually continuing with a program that I started last time. Last time I spoke on that same God, the miracle worker. This time I want to speak on that same Jesus, the healer. You know, I look in the New Testament and there's so many stories of healings. When Jesus had that 3 years of ministry here on earth, so many times that he performed miraculous healings. Oh, these weren't just any healings. They weren't like somebody stumped their toe or they had a cold or a little virus. Somebody could come along and say, well, you know, they would have got well anyway. No, these are miraculous healings. I want to start with a story about 2 blind men today who received their sight. It's found in Matthew chapter 20, verses 29 through 34. Now as they went out of Jericho, a great multitude followed him, and behold, 2 blind men sitting by the road. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. Now the multitude warned them that they should be quiet. But they cried out all the more, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. So Jesus stood still, and he called them and said, What do you want me to do for you? They said to him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. So Jesus had compassion and touched their eyes, and immediately their eyes received sight, and they followed him. Now, one of the reasons that I love this account is because there were 2 miracles that happened simultaneously. You know, so often, I think sometimes we get in these prayer lines for healing, and someone in front of us, you can tell that they've just received their healing, and it's almost like, well, no need in me going because they got the miracle today. Well, God used this story, I believe, to remind us that he is capable of doing multiple miracles even at the same time. You don't get tired or weary of going to God and asking. Remember, they called out more than once to Jesus. They asked him, Have mercy upon us, Father. Now then, there's another thing that I like about this one. One, when they received their healing, they followed after Jesus. When we receive a healing, stay close with Jesus. Always hold on to his hand. Then there was another thing that I picked up on this. There's a different kind of blindness that we need to cry out to the Lord for. There's this blindness of not being able to see Jesus. Sometimes we don't really see him. We're blind to his presence. We don't even sense that he's here, or even worse, we don't sense that he's alive or that he lives today. He's more like a historical fiction person. I think we have so much fiction in this world that we began to blend Jesus right into all of it. But folks, he's alive, and if you're blind to that today, begin to do what these 2 men did. Cry out to Jesus, and he will call you to him today, and he'll open your eyes to see the real Son of God, the living God, Jesus, God's Son. Now then, there was another thing about this particular story that I want to stick with for a second, because for years, this last part bothered me. Jesus asked the blind men, What do you want me to do for you? Now, in my mind, it was pretty obvious. They were blind. Why wouldn't Jesus have known that they wanted healing for their blindness? A couple years ago, I was in Kenya preaching at a pastor's leadership conference. And at that particular conference, it was packed out. There were hundreds, but the front row was filled with deaf pastors. And there was an interpreter right there. And in my spirit, All throughout the message, I was excited. I just knew that at the end of my message, when I had an altar call for healing, as they knew I always did, the entire row would just run to the front for their healing. But you know, not one deaf pastor ran to the front. Not one even walked to the front. And I thought, what? Now, I have some sign language training, and all throughout the service, I had periodically even just glanced over it, and I could see that he was signing what I was saying. So it wasn't that they hadn't been told. That bothered me so much. They could have had a healing that day. And so the Kenyan minister who was escorting me from conference to conference, I talked to him about it. And this is what he said. He said, sometimes we get just so comfortable in our circumstance, our own disability, our own situation, that it would be uncomfortable to change. So comfortable, I'm going to say, with our own misery, that we wouldn't run to Christ. But maybe he was right. Maybe they had become comfortable. They had somebody that went with them wherever they went. But, you know, Jesus asked them. So I think I began to understand a little more, because I wouldn't have asked these pastors. Jesus did. They could have said, we need some money, Lord. They could have said, we need a better place to stay. Thankfully, they said, we need sight. We need our blindness healed. I can tell you that many, many, many pastors who came to the altars during those conferences did receive healings, miraculous healings. The deaf and the blind and the lame, the cancers, the tumors, healing after healing and report after report. But those men will always stay in my mind for what could have been. Now let's look at another healing. It was a healing that took place one evening. It's found in Luke chapter 4, verse 40. When the sun was setting, all those who had any sick with various diseases brought them to him. And he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. See, the people in the area, they went and scurried back home after seeing Jesus and meeting him. They said, wait right here. They went and got their friends and they got their family, and they brought their family that was sick and had diseases, and they said, come here, Jesus can heal you. They brought them for the purpose of healing. They brought them to Jesus. And it says Jesus laid his hands upon them and healed every last one of them. Now, the other thing I like about this particular scenario is it tells us how we are to be as a community of Christians, to bring the sick, bring the dying, bring the lost to the throne room of Jesus. He is a healer. Now, I want you to look at the faith of the ones who ran back home. They loved whoever it was that they were going after. They would never want them to be disappointed one more time. We don't know how many doctors had given up on them. We don't know that. But I do know one thing. These people that ran back to the town to get their loved ones and their friends and their neighbors, they believed with all their heart that these sick people would not go home sick, that it was worth their effort to go get them, bring them to the healer, and then they would go back home healed. And in fact, that's what did happen. But it was faith that in Jesus Christ, in his healing power, that made them run to the town to go bring the sick. I want to look at one more, and this one we're going to look at very differently. I want to look at Lazarus for just a minute. I talked about Lazarus in my last program, and I want to bring him up again today. As we know, Lazarus was the brother of Martha and Mary. Those three were good friends with Jesus. Word traveled to Jesus that Lazarus was sick. We know Jesus waited a couple days, and then he told his disciples, we need to go and see Lazarus. When they arrive, let's watch what Martha says in verse 21 of chapter 11 of John. John 11, 21 through 27. Now Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he'll rise again in the resurrection at the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God. And we know that Mary, when she came along, she said the same thing. But the real issue that I want us to get across on this is that many of us have had I don't know if we want to call it a Lazarus experience or more like a Martha and Mary experience concerning Lazarus. And let Lazarus represent your broken dreams, dreams given up as though they were dead, buried, long gone, history. You see, Jesus is the healer of all things broken. Broken bodies, physically, emotionally. God is, His Son took the stripes upon the cross to pay for all things broken. Broken. Have you given up on your dreams as though they were dead? Let God call them out for you today. Let Him call out your dreams and breathe life back into your dream today. I believe that God would have us to take time today to say, Father, I recall that I trusted you with all my heart, but then one day it was like everything stopped and I let that dream be buried. But Father, I come back to you one more time today. Would you help that dream to have life again? Would you call it forth as life for me this day? Thank you for joining me.
We hope you've enjoyed Fresh Manna for Today with Evangelist D. Levens. For more from D, read The Long, Long Night, The Story of Destiny, and Echoes from God, a Christian study book for growing deep and strong in the faith. Connect with Dee and purchase her books at dlevens.com.